The alarm system screamed across every concordate station within 100 light-years. Something massive was coming through the void, and it was coming fast. High Matriarch Esselon stood in the central command chamber, her 3 eyes fixed on the displays that showed impossible readings. Ships were emerging from dead space, the region between spiral arms where nothing could survive. Every species in the galaxy knew this truth. The math was simple and absolute. Dead space had no star systems, no fuel, no resources. Any ship that entered would drift forever, its crew dying slowly in the dark. Yet 17 massive vessels were gliding out of that impossible darkness, as if they had simply taken a pleasant journey. "Get me identification," Esselon commanded. Her voice remained calm, though her secondary hearts were racing. In her 400 years of leadership, nothing had ever broken the fundamental rules of physics this way. The technician, a young Tarathi with trembling antennae, worked frantically at his station. "The hull signatures are..." "Matriarch, they match the old database. These are human ships." The command chamber fell silent. Every species knew the stories of humanity. They were legends, myths, cautionary tales told to young ones who thought about reaching too far too fast. Humans had appeared in the galaxy 50,000 years ago, establishing colonies with frightening speed. Then just as suddenly they had vanished. Most believed they had destroyed themselves in some catastrophic war. Others whispered they had been removed by the Concordate's predecessors, but those were just conspiracy theories. "Humans are extinct," Esselon said flatly. "Check your readings again." "I have checked them 17 times, Matriarch. The ships are broadcasting identification codes that match the old human colonial fleet. They are asking for permission to approach and requesting updated star charts." Esselon felt a cold weight settling in her chest. If humans had truly returned, everything was about to change. The careful balance the Concordate had maintained for 47,000 years, the comfortable lies that kept the galaxy stable, all of it was suddenly at risk. "Open a channel," she ordered. The main display flickered to life, showing the bridge of the lead human vessel. The woman who appeared was tall and dark-skinned, with close-cropped hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She wore a simple gray uniform with minimal decoration, but she carried herself with absolute authority. "This is Fleet Admiral Keisha Okoro of the Human Expeditionary Force," the woman said. Her voice was clear and direct. "We are the descendants of the colonies that left Earth 50,000 years ago. We have returned to reconnect with our sister colonies and learn what has become of the galaxy in our absence. We come in peace and request access to your historical archives." Esselon forced her face into a neutral expression. "I am High Matriarch Esselon of the Galactic Concordate. We are surprised by your arrival. Humanity has been absent from the galaxy for 48,000 years. We believed your species had perished." Something flickered across Admiral Okoro's face. Confusion, perhaps, or suspicion. 48,000 years? Our records show we left only 37,000 years ago. But that can be reconciled later. For now, we wish to visit our colony worlds and establish diplomatic relations with the Concordate. "Of course," Esselon said smoothly, though her mind was racing. "However, your former colony worlds have been under quarantine for millennia. They were contaminated by a biological weapon during the chaos of your disappearance. No one has been able to safely land there since. It was a practiced lie, one that had been told so many times it had become almost true in the minds of those who repeated it. But Admiral Okoro's expression hardened in a way that suggested she did not believe it for a moment. "We will send our own survey teams to assess the situation," Okoro said. "I'm sure you understand we cannot simply take your word about the status of our own colonies." "That would be inadvisable," Esselon began. But Okoro had already cut the transmission. In the silence that followed, a voice spoke from the back of the command chamber. "She knows you are lying, Matriarch." Esselon turned to see Archivist Velshara stepping forward. The old Tarathi was one of the Concordate's most respected scholars, a being who had spent 3 centuries studying the fragmentary records of humanity's time in the galaxy. "Everyone lies about the human colonies," Esselon said coldly. "It is necessary for the greater good." "The greater good," Velshara repeated, her antennae drooping with something that might have been sadness or disgust. "Is that what we call it now? I have spent my life studying humanity, Matriarch. I have traveled to their ruins, decoded their messages, pieced together the truth that the Concordate has worked so hard to hide. They did not disappear. They were driven out. Archivist, you are speaking dangerously close to treason, and you are speaking to someone who no longer cares about your threats, Velshara replied. The humans are back, and they have technology that should not exist. They crossed dead space, matriarch. Do you understand what that means? They have broken free of the substrate. They have learned to build truly original technology, the one thing the Concordat has suppressed for 47,000 years. Essilon felt a chill run through her body. The substrate was the foundation of all galactic civilization, the ancient technology network that powered their ships, their communication systems, their entire way of life. It had been left behind by the architects, the mysterious race that had vanished millions of years ago. Every species in the galaxy used it, studied it, built upon it, but no one created anything truly new. That was the unspoken rule, the carefully guarded secret. Any species that came close to genuine innovation was quietly suppressed, guided away from dangerous paths, or in extreme cases, removed entirely. Because the Concordat's founders had learned a terrible truth. Original technology could wake the architects. And no one knew what would happen if those ancient beings returned. The humans must not be allowed to access their colonies, Essilon said. Deploy the defense fleet. Tell them it is for quarantine enforcement. They will not believe that, Velshara said. Then we will make them believe it, Essilon replied. With force, if necessary. But even as she gave the orders, Essilon knew it was already too late. The human fleet had scattered, their ships moving in ways that made no sense. They were not using standard FTL drives. They were not following predictable physics. They were phasing through space in a manner that the Concordat sensors could barely track. Within hours, reports began flooding in. Human reconnaissance teams had reached 3 of the colony worlds. They had bypassed the defense satellites, ignored the warning beacons, and landed on the surface. And what they had found there would change everything. Admiral Okoro's face appeared on the display again, but this time there was no diplomacy in her expression. There was only cold, terrible anger. You lied, she said quietly. The colonies are not empty. They are not contaminated. They are full of people, human people. Millions of them living in conditions of slavery, told that their ancestors were criminals, kept deliberately primitive and ignorant. And you have been trading with them for 47,000 years. Essilon said nothing. There was nothing to say. We will be liberating our people, Admiral Okoro continued. All of them. From every colony. And then you and I are going to have a very long conversation about what happened to humanity and why you thought you could get away with this. The transmission ended, leaving Essilon staring at a blank screen. Around her, the command chamber had erupted into chaos, but she barely heard it. She was thinking about the substrate, about the architects, about the careful lies that had kept the galaxy stable for so long. The humans had returned, and they had shattered the first facade. Soon they would discover the others, and when they did, the galaxy would never be the same. The settlement on New Terra looked peaceful from orbit. Small villages dotted the landscape, connected by dirt roads. Fields of crops stretched between them in neat patterns. It could have been a scene from humanity's ancient past, from the time before they reached the stars. But Admiral Keisha Okoro knew better now. This was not peace. It was control. Lieutenant Chen stood beside her in the observation deck, his hands clenched into fists. He had been born on the fleet like most of the crew. He had never seen Earth or any of the old colonies. But the readings from the surface told him everything he needed to know about what had been done to his ancestors. They have been breeding them, Chen said, his voice hollow, for 47,000 years, keeping them at a pre-industrial level, not allowing them to advance, not allowing them to question, and telling them their ancestors were criminals, Okoro added, exiles who deserved their fate. It is an effective lie. If you convince people they are guilty, they will accept any punishment. She turned away from the window and walked to the briefing room. Her senior staff was already assembled. They had visited 3 colonies now, and the pattern was the same on each one. Millions of humans genetically descended from the original colonists, living simple lives under the watchful administration of Concordat advisors. The advisors claimed they were helping the poor, contaminated humans. They claimed they were protecting them from their own violent nature. But the truth was simpler and uglier. The remnant humans were a resource. They grew food that fed Concordat worlds. They mined minerals that powered Concordat ships. They created art and music that entertained Concordat citizens. And they did it all cheaply, efficiently, believing they had no right to anything better. We need to understand what really happened, Okoro said. The Concordat story does not make sense. Humanity did not simply vanish or destroy itself. We were removed. The question is why. Commander Park, her head of intelligence, activated a holographic display. We have been analyzing the historical records the Concordat provided. There are gaps. Large sections of data from the time of humanity's disappearance have been redacted or deleted. But we found references to something called the substrate crisis. What is the substrate? Okoro asked. That is where it gets interesting, Park replied. The substrate is the foundation of all galactic technology. It is an ancient network, left behind by a race called the Architects. Every FTL drive, every power core, every major piece of technology the Concordat uses is based on substrate principles. They did not invent any of it. They reverse-engineered it from architect ruins. Okoro felt a cold realization forming in her mind. And humanity was discovering this? More than that, Park said. According to fragmentary records, humanity was developing technology that did not use the substrate at all. Original technology, built from different principles. The Concordat's predecessors considered this a threat. The door to the briefing room slid open. Archivist Velshara entered, escorted by 2 security officers. The old Tarathi had requested asylum with the human fleet after Admiral Okoro's confrontation with the High Matriarch. Okoro had granted it, sensing the archivist knew more than she was saying. You are correct, Commander Park, Velshara said, her translator rendering her clicking speech into clear English. Humanity was a threat, not because you were violent or aggressive, but because you were creative. You did not accept the substrate as the only way to build technology. You experimented, you innovated, and you were succeeding. She moved to the holographic display and manipulated it with surprising skill. New data appeared, files she had smuggled out of the Concordat archives. 48,000 years ago, humanity discovered the truth about the substrate. You learned that it was not just ancient technology. It was a test. The architects left it behind deliberately to see what future species would do with it. Would they simply copy it, becoming dependent on something they did not understand? Or would they use it as a foundation to build something genuinely new? And the Concordat did not want anyone passing that test, Okoro said. Exactly, Velshara confirmed. Because there was a fear. The architects left warnings in their ruins. Warnings that using the substrate without understanding it could wake them from their long sleep. The Concordat's founders decided the safest path was to suppress all original innovation. Keep everyone using only substrate technology, never advancing beyond it, never risking the return of the architects. But humanity would not accept that limitation, Lieutenant Chen said. No, you would not. Your scientists were publishing papers on alternative physics. Your engineers were building prototype drives that operated on completely different principles. The Concordat ordered you to stop. Humanity refused. So they made a decision. They would remove humanity from the galaxy entirely. They attacked your core worlds, destroyed your infrastructure, scattered your people. Most humans died in the initial assault. The survivors on the colony worlds were isolated, their technology destroyed, their history erased. They were told they were criminals, exiles, unworthy of advancement. And over generations they believed it. Okoro felt rage building in her chest, cold and controlled. And the humans who escaped? The ones who became us? A fleet of colony ships managed to jump into dead space before they could be destroyed, Velshara said. The Concordat assumed you would die there. No one survives dead space. No one has the resources to cross it. But you did. You spent 48,000 years in the void, building a civilization from scratch, developing technology that did not depend on the substrate. And now you have returned. The briefing room was silent. Every officer present was processing the magnitude of what had been done to their ancestors, to their people. The betrayal was almost too large to comprehend. We need to free the colonies, Okoro said finally. All of them, immediately. The Concordat will fight you, Velshara warned. They have a massive fleet. They have weapons built from architect technology. You may have original technology, but they have the accumulated firepower of 47 species. Let them fight, Commander Park said quietly. We did not cross dead space and survive the void just to abandon our people to slavery. Okoro nodded. Begin the liberation operations. All colonies, simultaneous strikes. We take down their satellites, disable their administrative centers, and tell the people the truth. Let them decide their own future. And the Concordat? Shen asked. We offer them one chance to surrender peacefully and face justice for what they have done. Okoro said. If they refuse, we will show them exactly what humanity learned in 48,000 years of forced innovation. As her officers moved to execute her orders, Belshara remained behind. Admiral, there is one more thing you should know. The Concordat has a final weapon. If they believe they are truly losing, they will activate it. It is an architect device, something they have never fully understood. They believe it will reset all technology in the galaxy, giving them a chance to start over. But I do not think they know what it will really do. What do you think it will do? Okoro asked. Belshara's antennae trembled. I think it will wake the architects. And I think that is what they have been afraid of all along. Not that the architects will destroy the galaxy, but that the architects will judge the Concordat and find them wanting. Because they have spent 47,000 years using stolen technology while punishing anyone who tried to create something original, and the architects may not forgive that. Okoro looked out at the stars, at the galaxy her ancestors had been driven from. Then we need to move quickly, before the Concordat becomes desperate enough to destroy everything. Below them on New Terra, the first human ships were beginning their descent. The liberation had begun. And across the galaxy, the carefully maintained lies were starting to crumble. The battle for New Terra lasted 3 hours. The Concordat defense fleet arrived expecting an easy victory. They had superior numbers, superior firepower, and 47,000 years of military tradition. What they did not have was an answer to humanity's impossible tactics. Commander Park watched from the tactical station as Concordat cruisers attempted to target human ships. The enemy vessels were using standard engagement patterns, positioning themselves for broadside exchanges, preparing to wear down the human fleet through attrition. It was sound strategy, proven over millennia of warfare, but the human ships simply were not there when the weapons fired. They are still trying to predict our movements based on substrate physics, Park observed. They cannot understand that our drives work differently. A Concordat battleship unleashed a devastating barrage at the position where human frigate Determination should have been. But Determination had phased slightly out of normal space, using principles the Concordat did not even have words for. The weapons passed harmlessly through empty space. Determination reappeared behind the battleship and disabled its engines with a single precise strike. Admiral Okoro had been clear in her orders. Disable, do not destroy. Take prisoners when possible. Show the galaxy that humanity had not returned for revenge, but for justice. But not everyone in the Concordat was interested in justice. High Matriarch Esselin stood in her command chamber, watching her fleet fall apart. Ship after ship was disabled, boarded, captured. The humans were not fighting like any opponent she had ever encountered. They did not follow the rules. They did not respect the established patterns of warfare. They simply did what should have been impossible. Deploy the architect weapons, she ordered. Her second-in-command, a cautious Velrothi named Cross, hesitated. Matriarch, those weapons are unpredictable. We have only used them in controlled tests. In a real battle, the consequences could be... Deploy them, Esselin repeated, her voice cold. The order went out. Across the Concordat fleet, ancient devices activated. They had been recovered from architect ruins, studied for centuries, but never fully understood. The technology was simply too advanced, operating on principles that seemed to bend reality itself. In the human fleet, alarms began screaming. Energy spike detected. Lieutenant Chen called out. Pattern unknown. Admiral, whatever they are using, it is not standard substrate technology. Evasive maneuvers, Okoro ordered. Full phase shift, the architect weapon fired. It did not shoot projectiles or beams of energy. Instead, space itself seemed to fold in on the targeted area. 3 human ships were caught in the effect. Their hulls compressed, twisted, crushed by forces that should not exist in normal physics. The bridge of the flagship went silent. They had lost 97 crew members in an instant. Continue the operation, Okoro said quietly, and target the ships carrying those weapons. Priority 1. The battle shifted. Humanity had been fighting carefully, minimizing casualties on both sides. But the Concordat had escalated, and now the human fleet responded with equal force. Ships that had been merely disabled were now destroyed. The Concordat fleet, already reeling, began to break apart entirely. Within an hour, it was over. The surviving Concordat ships jumped away, retreating to regroup. The human fleet held New Terra. On the surface, something even more significant was happening. Jorah had lived his entire life in the settlement of New Hope. He was 23 years old, a farmer like his father and grandfather before him. He had been taught that his ancestors were criminals, exiles who had tried to defy the Concordat and paid the price. He had been taught to be grateful for the guidance of the advisors who helped his people survive despite their shameful history. He had never questioned any of it. Until the day the ships came from the sky. They were not Concordat ships. They looked different, moved differently. When they landed, soldiers emerged wearing gray uniforms and carrying weapons that seemed almost organic in design, and their faces were human faces. One of them, a woman with dark skin and kind eyes, approached Jorah and his neighbors who had gathered in the village square. She was not alone. Behind her, the Concordat advisor who had governed their region for the past 50 years was being led away in restraints. "My name is Captain Williams," the woman said. "I am from the Human Expeditionary Force. We have come to tell you the truth about who you are." The story she told seemed impossible. That humanity had not been criminals but pioneers. That they had been driven from the galaxy by the Concordat, their colonies enslaved, their history erased. That somewhere in the void the survivors had built a new civilization and now returned to free their descendants. Jorah wanted to reject it. His entire understanding of the world said it could not be true. But as Captain Williams spoke, something in his heart recognized the truth. The shame he had always felt, the sense that something was wrong with the world, the questions he had never been allowed to ask, all of it suddenly made sense. "You are saying we are not criminals?" an old woman asked, her voice trembling. "You are not criminals," Captain Williams confirmed. "You are the descendants of brave people who built new worlds. The Concordat lied to you. They used you, but that ends today. You are free to choose your own path now." Across New Terra, the same scene was playing out in thousands of settlements. Some people believed immediately. Others resisted, clinging to the lies they had been taught. But the truth was spreading like wildfire, and nothing would stop it now. In orbit, Admiral Okoro was receiving reports from all 23 colony worlds. The liberation operations were succeeding, though not without difficulty. Some Concordat forces fought to the bitter end. Some remnant humans, too indoctrinated to accept the truth, attacked the liberators, but most embraced their freedom with desperate joy. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the Concordat core worlds," Lieutenant Chen reported. "It is High Matriarch Esselan." Okoro straightened. "Put her through." Esselan's face appeared on the display. She looked older than before, worn down by the weight of her failure. "Admiral Okoro, I am prepared to discuss terms of surrender." "Surrender?" Okoro repeated. "You enslaved my people for 47,000 years. You destroyed our civilization. You lied to the entire galaxy. And now you want to discuss terms?" "What do you want?" Esselan asked. "Revenge, blood, the destruction of the Concordat? That will destabilize the entire galaxy. Billions will suffer. I want justice," Okoro said simply. "And I want the truth. Tell the galaxy what you did. Release all records of the substrate, of the architects, of everything you have been hiding. Let every species know the lies they have been living under." "If I do that, you will doom us all," Esselan said. "The substrate is stable only because we control it. If every species begins experimenting with original technology, they will wake the architects. And you have no idea what will happen then." "Neither do you," Okoro countered. "You have spent 47,000 years afraid of a possibility. Well, humanity is not afraid. We will take that risk. And we will offer other species the same choice." Esselan's expression hardened. "Then you leave me no choice. If you will not accept peace on my terms, I will use the final option. There is an architect device, a weapon that will reset all advanced technology in the galaxy. It will send us back to basics, but it will also neutralize your advantage. We can start over, build a new order." "You do not know what that device really does." Velshara's voice cut in. The archivist had been listening to the exchange. "You have guessed its purpose, but you have never activated it. For all you know, it will destroy all life in the galaxy." "A risk I am willing to take," Esselan said. "Better to end everything than to let chaos reign." The transmission cut off. Okoro looked at her bridge crew. Options? We cannot reach the core worlds before they activate the device, Park said. It would take days and they can trigger it in hours. Velshara stepped forward. There may be another way. The device is connected to the substrate network. If we can disrupt the substrate in this region, it might prevent the activation signal from reaching the device. How do we disrupt the substrate? Okoro asked. Velshara's antennae trembled. By doing exactly what the Concordat has feared for 47,000 years. By activating enough original technology all at once to overwhelm the network. It will wake the architects. But it may be our only choice. Okoro closed her eyes briefly. Her ancestors had been driven into the void for this very reason. For developing technology that threatened to wake ancient beings. Now she was being asked to finish what they had started. Do it, she said. The human fleet spread across 17 star systems, each ship activating its full complement of original technology. The effect on the substrate network was immediate and catastrophic. Every sensor tied to the ancient system registered the disturbance. It spread like ripples in a pond, growing stronger with each passing second. On dead worlds across the galaxy, things that had been dormant for millions of years began to wake up. Admiral Okoro stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the readings with a mixture of hope and dread. They had successfully disrupted the substrate enough to prevent the Concordat from activating their doomsday device. But the cost of that success was becoming clear. Admiral, we are detecting energy signatures on over 300 planets, Lieutenant Chen reported, his voice tight with tension. They match the patterns we found in architect ruins, but they are orders of magnitude stronger. They are waking up, Velshara said quietly. The archivist stood at her station, her antennae drooping with what Okoro had learned to recognize as Tarathi fear. After all these millions of years, we have finally woken them. The first architect appeared on a barren moon, orbiting a Concordat mining colony. The workers there watched in terror as the surface began to glow with soft blue light. A shape emerged from the ground, rising slowly into the thin atmosphere. It was not organic, not mechanical, not anything that fit into familiar categories. It was a pattern of light and energy, folding space around itself, existing in more dimensions than the human eye could perceive. The miners fled to their ships. The architect did not pursue them. It simply hovered above the moon's surface, observing as if seeing the galaxy for the first time in eons. Within hours, architects were appearing across the galaxy. They emerged from worlds that had been catalogued as dead rocks, from moons that had never been colonized, from regions of space that no one had ever visited. There were hundreds of them, then thousands, each one unique, each one terrifyingly alien, and they were scanning everything. On the Concordat core world of Velrath, High Matriarch Essalon watched the reports flood in with growing horror. The architects were examining every settlement, every ship, every piece of technology. They were not attacking, not communicating, just observing with an intensity that suggested they were taking inventory of everything the younger races had built. Can we communicate with them? She asked her science advisors. We have tried every method we know, the lead advisor replied. Radio, laser, quantum entanglement, even direct broadcast through the substrate network. They do not respond. It is as if they do not recognize us as intelligent beings. Then what do they see us as? Essalon demanded. The advisor had no answer. In the human fleet, Velshara was working frantically to find a solution. She had spent 3 centuries studying the architects, decoding their ruins, piecing together fragments of their history. If anyone could establish communication, it would be her. The architects do not think like organic beings, she explained to Admiral Okoro. They are not biological. They were never born, never evolved. They were created by an even older race, constructed as caretakers of the galaxy. They see the universe in terms of patterns and systems, not individuals and societies. So how do we make them see us as something other than debris to be cleaned up? Okoro asked. We show them that we are capable of original creation, Velshara said. The substrate was a test. They left it behind to see if future races would become dependent on it or use it as a foundation for genuine innovation. Humanity passed that test 48,000 years ago. That is why you are invisible to them. We are invisible? Lieutenant Chen asked, confused. Your ships, your technology, everything you have built operates on principles that do not interact with the substrate, Velshara explained. To the architects, you are not using their technology, which means you have graduated beyond their test. They have no reason to catalog you because you have proven you can build without copying. Okoro felt a chill run down her spine. But everyone else in the galaxy is still using substrate technology, which means the architects see them as failures. Not failures, Velshara corrected. Children playing with dangerous toys. And based on what I have decoded from architect ruins, they have a protocol for dealing with such situations. They recycle the materials and reset the test for the next cycle of intelligent life. They are going to wipe out the entire galactic civilization, Commander Park said, her voice hollow. Unless we can convince them not to, Velshara agreed. The question was how. The architects did not communicate in any way the Concordat understood. They did not respond to pleas or threats. They simply continued their slow, methodical examination of every world, every ship, every piece of technology, categorizing everything according to criteria no organic mind could comprehend. On New Terra, Jorah was experiencing his first week of freedom. It was overwhelming. The human liberators had given his people access to technology, education, the truth about their history. Some of his neighbors embraced it eagerly. Others struggled with the sudden loss of everything they had believed. Jorah was somewhere in between. Part of him rejoiced at the knowledge that his ancestors had not been criminals, but part of him mourned the simple certainty of his old life. Freedom, he was discovering, came with the burden of choice. Then the architect arrived. It appeared in the sky above New Hope, a swirling pattern of light that hurt to look at directly. The villagers panicked, running for cover. But Jorah found himself frozen, staring up at the impossible being. It seemed to be studying the settlement, the fields, the people, and Jorah had the strangest feeling that it was disappointed. Captain Williams ran to his side, pulling him toward the shelter. Do not look directly at it. We do not know what it might do. It is sad, Jorah said, surprising himself with the words. I can feel it. It is sad because we are not what it wanted us to be. Williams stopped, staring at him. What do you mean? My people, Jorah said slowly, working through thoughts he did not fully understand. We lived here for 47,000 years, and we never built anything original. We never tried to understand the universe. We just followed the rules the Concordat gave us. We failed the test. On the flagship, alarms began blaring. The architects had stopped simply observing. They were beginning to act. The first world to be recycled was an uninhabited moon used for mining. The architect there extended tendrils of energy into the surface and began breaking down the mining equipment at a molecular level. Within minutes, advanced machinery had been reduced to base elements. The architect then reshaped those elements into new structures, simple and geometric, before departing. They are dismantling our technology, Esselon said numbly, watching the reports, reducing it to raw materials. This is the end of everything we have built. In her command chamber, she made a decision. If the galaxy was going to end, she would face it with what dignity remained. She ordered her fleet to stand down to stop resisting. There was no point in fighting beings who could unmake reality itself. But in the human fleet, Velshara had an idea. Admiral, I believe I can communicate with them, she said. Not through language, but through demonstration. We need to show them that the younger races are capable of learning, of growing beyond the substrate, that they deserve a chance. How? Okoro asked. Let me take a shuttle to one of the architects, Velshara said. I will bring nothing with me but my own mind and basic tools, and I will show it that I can build something original, something that does not rely on substrate technology. If I can prove that even one being from the Concordat races can pass their test, perhaps they will reconsider. It was a desperate plan, but they had no other options. Go, Okoro said, and may whatever gods watch over scholars protect you. Velshara took a shuttle to the nearest architect, the one hovering above a dead world in the outer rim. She brought nothing but a pack of basic elements, raw materials with no inherent technology, and she brought the knowledge humanity had shared with her, the principles of original creation that did not depend on ancient gifts. The architect observed as the small Tarathi emerged from her shuttle and began to build. It took her 3 days. 3 days of working with basic physics, of trial and error, of genuine innovation. She failed a dozen times. But eventually she created a simple device that generated power through principles she had derived herself, not copied from the substrate. The architect examined her work. Then, for the first time since waking, it responded, not with words but with a pulse of energy that Velshara's translator interpreted as recognition. The test could be retaken. The younger races would have another chance. The message from the architects spread through the substrate network like a gentle wave. It was not spoken in words but conveyed in pure meaning, understood by every intelligent being in the galaxy simultaneously. The younger races had failed the test. They had used the substrate without understanding it, copying without creating, advancing without learning. But one among them had demonstrated the capacity for original thought. Therefore, the test would not end in recycling. Instead, it would be restructured. High Matriarch Esselin stood in her command chamber, processing the impossible reprieve. They were not going to be wiped out. But the relief was short-lived, replaced by a new and terrible understanding. The architects were offering a choice, and it was not a comfortable one. Admiral Okoro received the same message, but she understood it better than most. The architects were ancient beings who thought in terms of millions of years. They did not care about comfort or convenience. They cared only about potential, about whether a species could eventually reach true understanding. They are offering us 3 paths, Velshara explained when she returned to the flagship. The archivist was exhausted but exhilarated, having succeeded in communication where no one else could. 3 ways the galaxy can reorganize itself. She brought up a holographic display showing the architect's proposal. It was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. The first path is the substrate zone, Velshara said. Species who choose this path can continue using substrate technology. The architects will maintain it, even improve it. But those species will never be allowed to advance beyond it. They will be comfortable, stable, but forever dependent. They will be the children who never grow up. Lieutenant Chen frowned. That is what the Concordat has been for 47,000 years. Yes, Velshara agreed. But now it will be honest. No more lies about innovation. No more suppressing species who want to try something different. Just a clear choice to accept limitation in exchange for security. And the second path? Koro asked. The independent zone. Species who choose this must abandon the substrate entirely. All of it. Every piece of technology that relies on it must be destroyed or left behind. They start over from basics, building everything from scratch using their own innovation. It will be hard. Many will die in the transition, but those who survive will be building genuinely original civilizations. Commander Park shook her head. Most species will not accept that, giving up everything they have built. Which is why there is a third path, Velshara said quietly. The transcendent zone. Species who cannot accept either option can choose to upload their consciousness into the substrate itself, becoming digital beings. They will live forever in a virtual paradise, but they will no longer exist in physical reality. The bridge fell silent. The architects were not offering destruction. They were offering reorganization, but it meant the end of the galaxy as everyone knew it. High Matriarch Esselin is calling, Lieutenant Chen reported. She requests immediate communication with Admiral Okoro. When Esselin's face appeared on the display, she looked decades older than she had just days before. The weight of her civilization's survival rested on her shoulders. Admiral, we need to coordinate, Esselin said without preamble. The architects are demanding a choice within 30 days. Every species must decide which path to take. This will tear the galaxy apart. It was already torn apart, Okoro replied. You spent 47,000 years maintaining a comfortable lie. Now everyone must face uncomfortable truth. That is not destruction. That is growth. Easy for you to say, Esselin snapped. Humanity has already built an independent civilization. You can thrive in any of these zones. But my people, the Velrathi, we have used substrate technology for 90,000 years. We do not even remember what it is like to innovate from scratch. If we choose the independent zone, billions will die during the transition. Then choose the substrate zone, Okoro suggested. There is no shame in admitting you want stability. Esselin's 3 eyes closed briefly. But there is shame in giving up the possibility of growth. My entire civilization has been built on that shame, on the fear of what might happen if we tried to advance beyond what the architects gave us. I do not want to condemn my descendants to that same fear for eternity. She paused, then continued in a quieter voice. I am proposing a 4th option. One the architects have not explicitly offered, but also have not forbidden. We divide my species. Those who want security choose the substrate zone. Those willing to take the risk choose the independent zone. And those who cannot face either choice can transcend. We split into 3 peoples connected by history but separated by choice. It was a radical proposal, but as Okoro considered it, she realized it made sense. Why should entire species be locked into single choices? Why not let individuals decide their own paths? The architects might not allow it, Velshara warned. They think in terms of species and civilizations, not individuals. Then we teach them to think differently, Okoro said. Velshara, can you communicate this proposal to them? The archivist hesitated, then nodded. I can try. On New Terra, Jorah was facing his own choice. Captain Williams had explained the 3 paths, had made it clear that every human on every colony would need to decide. Most of the remnant humans were choosing the independent zone. After 47,000 years of forced primitivism, they wanted to build something new, something truly their own. But Jorah was not sure. He had spent his entire life as a farmer. He understood crops and seasons, not advanced technology. The idea of abandoning what little the Concordat had given them, of starting from absolute basics, terrified him. You do not have to decide alone, Williams told him. That is the beauty of choice. You can discuss it with your community. Figure out what works for your people. Some settlements are choosing to stay together. Others are dividing based on what individuals want. What are you choosing? Jorah asked. Williams smiled. I am military. I go where humanity needs me. But if I had a choice, I would choose the independent zone. I have seen what we built in dead space starting from nothing. It was hard, but it was ours. That is worth any hardship. Jorah thought about his crops, his simple life, the quiet satisfaction of watching things grow. Then he thought about his ancestors, who had crossed the stars, who had dared to innovate, who had refused to accept limitations. Which future honored them better? Safety or struggle? He made his choice. Velshara returned with unexpected news. The architects had accepted the concept of individual choice within species. More than that, they had refined it. The 3 zones would not be segregated by species, but by philosophy. Any being from any species could choose any path. The galaxy would reorganize itself, not along racial lines, but along chosen futures. The substrate zone would be managed by the architects themselves, kept stable and safe. The independent zone would be left to develop on its own, with no interference. And the transcendent zone would be a digital realm where consciousness could explore infinite possibilities. But there was one more element to the architect's proposal. A 4th role that no one had anticipated. Humanity has been offered a choice, Velshara explained to the assembled admirals and captains. Because you passed the original test, because you built an independent civilization, the architects recognize you as graduates. You can claim a special status. You can become the guides, the teachers for species trying to transition to the independent zone. You would have authority to move between all 3 zones, helping others learn what you already know. Why would they want us to have that power? Commander Park asked suspiciously. Because they understand something we do not, Velshara said. The transition to independence will be brutal. Billions will die trying to innovate from scratch. But if humanity shares its knowledge, provides guidance, the cost will be much lower. You will not give technology but teach principles, not provide answers but show how to find them. Admiral Okoro considered it carefully. And if we refuse? If we simply take our people and leave this galaxy to sort itself out? That is also your right, Velshara confirmed. The architects do not command. They offer. You could take all the remnant humans, all those who choose the independent path, and depart for a new region of space. Build your own civilization far from the complications of the Concordat's legacy. It was tempting. To wash their hands of the galaxy that had betrayed humanity, to start fresh somewhere else. No one would blame them. But Okoro thought of the remnant humans, of Jorah and millions like him, who had lived in slavery through no fault of their own. She thought of species like the Tarathi, whose crime had been curiosity. She thought of the future her descendants would inherit and what kind of people she wanted them to be. We stay, she said. We help. Not because we owe the Concordat anything, but because we owe ourselves. Humanity did not survive dead space just to abandon others to the same darkness we escaped. The decision made, the galaxy began its great reorganization. It took 5 years. 5 years of chaos, argument, division, and occasional violence as species and individuals made their choices. High Matriarch Essalon stood trial for her crimes against humanity. The court was unlike anything the galaxy had seen, composed of judges from all 3 zones and all species.